Ladies and gentlemen, Guy McKinnon here from Men's Boxing. I'm here with Eddie Hearn. Eddie, how are you, sir?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Just arrived, so a little bit tired, but very excited for a huge night on Wednesday.
It's going to be a huge one and a really, really big event for Australian boxing in general. That's what I really want to speak to you today about Australian boxing and this resurgence that it's really had. I'd love to know some of your opinions on it. Obviously, you've gotten George Kambosos, who's achieved some. I reckon he was the catalyst of this resurgence of Australian boxing. Would you agree with that, with his defeat of Teofimo Lopez?
I think you've got so many great fighters. I mean, obviously, George had the big win against Teofimo Lopez. Tim Tszyu's done a great job the last couple of years as well. You've got Liam Parra had a massive World Championship win. Sky Nicholson's won world titles. Justice Huni's a great young heavyweight. Terra Moana now looks like a real force in the heavyweight division. There's so, not just Australian fighters with us, but so many great Australian fighters. I think in the past, they've always wanted to fight internationally, and that's important, but I think it's great to bring big fights to Australia. And I think Opetaia Naika just is a brilliant way to kickstart 2025.
I've always said that with George Kambosos bringing his fights with Haney here and his fights with Lomachenko, in 10, 15 years, that's going to generate another world champion. It's really engaging that grassroots of Australian boxing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I do think we've got to keep pushing boxing to the masses. And I think that's why amateur boxing is important. The Olympic Games, that gets seen by a lot of people. And, you've got fighters like Katie Parker, won the first Australian medal this year. Charlie Senior as well, good young fighter. And you've seen great fighters from the amateur code come through. So that's important. Grassroots is very important. You've got to keep inspiring that next generation. But you've got to make sure big name American fighters are fighting internationally, but also fighting here. And for us, we'll have Wednesday night with Mick, and then in March we're looking to do a big show in Sydney as well with George Kambosos. So we want to do at least 4 shows a year here, but it'd be great to do 8 or 10 or 12 regular shows and keeping the broadcaster pushing the action and the profile of Australian boxing.
Is this playing in conjunction with, say, a No Limit?
No. I mean, we can work with anybody. Obviously, we work a lot with Mick because we've got Jai Opetaia, Justice Huni, Connor Wallace, Terra Moana, all with him. We've got Liam Parra with Angelo, and Ace Boxing. We've worked with No Limit on sort of opponents and stuff like that. Happy to do something with them as well. Like, I've had conversations with them. It doesn't really matter to us. It's what makes good shows. It's what makes a good business model. And you get all these promoters in Australia kind of scrapping with each other. I know I've been there, but maybe I can come in and just be a little bit of a peacemaker and say, look, guys, we can all work together. And there's a big market here, I think, and you've got great fighters as well.
So it's a wildly untapped market, but also the Pacific Islands and all this area here. Obviously, New Zealand, we have Joseph Parker, who a lot of people, I think, are underestimating against Dubois.
I think he wins the fight. I'm kind of like Joseph's unofficial promoter. He's a mate of mine. I love him, and I think he's going to win. I do. I think he's got the style to beat Daniel Dubois. I think sometimes when you get that big win, you get a little bit carried away. See him in the ring against, calling out Usyk, and if I'm Joseph Parker, I'm just chipping away, working away, and it's a tough fight, but I think he'll win.
I've always been a big fan of Joseph Parker. He's definitely rebuilt his career and really found a style, I think, over the last 3 fights, where he's like a boxer puncher almost more now, and really, I don't know, works strength and conditioning, but it's been fantastic.
Yeah, I think he's just taking it really seriously. I think all fighters just find that moment where they say, I'm going to work harder, I'm going to be smarter. And Joseph, every time you see him, he looks strong. And he's worked really, really hard. I think, by all accounts, I don't know him, but his strength and conditioning trainer, I think it's George Lockhart, has made a massive difference to his engine. And now I think he's taking it seriously. I think he's in the form of his career. And I think he's got the kind of style that will really trouble Daniel Dubois.
100% agree with that prediction and that analysis, if you will. With that said, with Australian boxing, bringing it to the masses, as you're saying, I think, because right now I think it's number 7 or 8 popular sports in Australia. It's relatively a niche. In the UK, obviously it's very big, but still a relatively niche sport. I feel like with more coming through, it's definitely going to be a surge of champions and an untapped potential here as well for Southern Hemisphere boxing. We're going to catch up like we are in the rugby, don't you think?
Yeah, maybe. But it's about the masses, like you say, and we've got to make sure that the great young fighters and the great fighters are seen by a big audience. In the past, because broadcasters would only want to do pay-per-view for boxing, it's a double-edged sword. It allows you to do the shows, but it limits the audience. So people like Kambosos and Opataya and Zoo, they're pay-per-view fighters. That's fine, we accept that. But it'd be great to do quality shows off pay-per-view as well to keep growing that audience.
100%. Do you think America probably went a bit overboard with the pay-per-views and some of those other promotions
Especially
there?
the price. I mean, it's what, 80 US dollars. So like 150 Aussie. I mean, it's very expensive for a night of boxing. And yeah, I think we understand as boxing fans that pay-per-view exists, and for the big names, that's what happens. But it'd be great to do quality shows without it as well.
With this big show coming to Sydney, they seem to have really dodged Sydney for a lot of it. We've had them in Melbourne, we've had them in Perth, we've had them in here in sunny Gold Coast or Brisbane. However, this one coming to Sydney, I think, is going to be a big barn burner, if you will.
Yeah.
Are there any ideas of who's going to face?
No,
Kambosos Paro, question mark?
No, not Kambosos Para, but we're looking at Kambosos in a good fight at 140 to get himself into that division and get himself ranked. Sky Nicholson against potentially Tiara Brown or a unification. Shanika Johnson against Nina Hughes. We all remember that infamous decision that was called out in the last fight. It was a great fight. Justice Honey, Connor Wallace, Tara Moana. Like we can build incredible shows now. So this is the second show that I've done in Australia, and both of them have been in Queensland. So it'd be great to do a show in Sydney. And of course, George Kambosos hasn't fought in Sydney for 8 years. So it's something we're definitely considering.
I remember I was there at his last show. I think it was the Luna Park here in Sydney. Final question, sir. What is the upside of George Kambosos? Obviously, signing to a major label like yourself, you see there's upside here for him and a popularity. What is his upside at 140?
I mean, look, firstly, he's a great self-promoter, right? I think he's the biggest name in Australian boxing because of what he's achieved. And he's still a great fighter. You know, I think we have the champion in Richardson Hitchens. We also have tremendous fighters across the board in the division. But we also have a straight shot for him to fight for the World Championship in New York, potentially. So a good win in March against a ranked opponent, and you could see him fighting for a world title to try and become a two-division world champion, which is a huge accolade.
It's huge. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Good talking.